classics like that. And since then, I've been exposed to, new sensations like Cowboy Bebop, which isn't really new, but it revolutionized that industry. And Kuro Shitsuji is another good one. And then, TCG hopping around, I found other games that I was interested in, and then I had a friend who was managing the shop here who was like, hey, come and play other games. So I did, and I played some board games. And I was like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then I actually got a job working here, and I was like, oh.
It's what happens if you hang out here long enough.
There's all this other stuff, too. So then it wasn't so much necessarily enjoyment, although that was part of it, but also it was part of my job to try and learn more about all of this stuff. So I wasn't big into comic books, and then when I started here, it's like, you should know a little bit about comic books. And I'm like, okay, well, I know Batman's Bruce Wayne. Does that count? It's like, yeah, that's a start. So then I read lots of comic books, and now I know a decent amount about that. And I've played a lot of board games, although there's still more to play, always. And, I've played different RPG systems, and that's, always fun seeing the mechanics and the nuts and bolts of each one of those. And it's a slippery slope once you get into it.
It's easy to become a collector.
The only thing that I haven't gotten into is miniatures games, just because,
Time and money.
Time and money. I painted models when I was growing up, Gundam models, actually. So, forgot to mention Gundam Wing being one of my favorites. But I was painting Gundam models and whatnot, and then I get here and it's like, oh, they also make them small metal guys with smaller detail that you can paint too. And I'm like, don't know if I have the time and patience for that anymore. Give me a video game.
What about you, Jennifer? How did
my
you get into
background's
this?
very, very different. I'm a funny story because I've always loved sci-fi, and I've always, I had a Nintendo as a kid, and I was a serious video gamer, but my introduction was mainly in literature. I love Heinlein, I love Asimov, I love Herbert, and King, and so when I was young, I was just reading voraciously. All the way through high school. And in my high school, Magic the Gathering was something nerds did before band practice. And I was always kind of looking at them, because I was in band, and going, that looks like an interesting strategic card game. I wish I knew them. I wonder if they'd teach me to play. No, they probably don't like me. So I thought that I was too nerdy to get into Magic the Gathering. And, I was so wrong. But, and then in college, one of my friends came to me and said, hey, would you and your boyfriend like to join our Dungeons & Dragons campaign? And I said, Dungeons & Dragons? I think I've heard of that. Why not? So my first D&D campaign, I was in college. And so I kind of have a really different perspective on the industry as a whole, because my memory is very short for it.
Okay.
Because all of my introduction to this was college and post-college. And basically, immediately out of college, we opened the store. So Mark was the driving force for a lot of that, because he was already a gamer and he knew about all this. And my specialty was really board games and novels and stuff like that. So, but since then I've become a big minis gamer, a big role player. Less and less time for the novels, sadly.
So now you feel just nerdy enough to play Magic the Gathering.
No, I really like Neil Stephenson and don't have time to read much else.
Oh yeah. Did you get Anathem? Did you read?
Oh my gosh, yeah, so good.
Of course, yeah. All right. Well, we mentioned a little bit earlier. It's a great time to be a sci-fi fan, especially like you said. The games has been exploding. The novels are getting just so great. The comics are coming out. How does this all work as a business? I've had a great experience with the staff, and you kind of gave me a sneak peek when you said if you hang out here long enough, you get hired.
Yeah.
So is that how you find most of the people who work in the store?
Actually, it's been really, really super easy to find staff now that we have a store. When we were in a warehouse, just doing the internet thing, hiring was really, really difficult. And even if we were looking for people who didn't have specific genre knowledge, but since we've opened the store, we get 10 resumes a week with people going, I'd love to work here. This must be really fun. And on some level, they don't have a complete understanding of how much work it is. But we do try to hire. We get a really good experience with people as they're hanging out, and so we kind of have a good estimation of their character and what they're like. And so we have made several hires from that pool. Some of the people who've been here longest started out working on the subscription service. We have a, because we get so many books in on Wednesdays, we have a lot of temporary help that comes in on Wednesdays and bags and boards and helps us get subscriptions out. And that's a really good gateway to finding a long-term job here.
Yeah, my assistant manager actually was working the comic book Wednesdays for us for like, what was it, 6 months or a year?
Like that.
Something like
less
that.
Than a year, but
and then it was
as soon as
like,
something
well,
opened
we've
up,
got
we were
a
like,
staff opening. What do you think? And she's like, okay, we'll give this a try. And I mean, it's just been...
and it's infectious because she wasn't a gamer or anything, and now she's
Yeah.
in 6 different games.
Once you're in here, you're lost. You're done.
It
for
is.
Yeah.
You're done for. It's definitely a slippery slope.
Yeah, I came in there to look at comics for the leading up into the 3-year party, and then I picked up a couple more comics because my son's 3, and so I got some of the Tiny Titans, that kind of thing, and he wasn't quite ready. But I saw all the games, and all the old memories for me came back. I was like, oh no, yes, must get back into this. So I'm awesome to come in and talk to you
You better
guys.
watch it. I mean, Jennifer will get you to an Arcane Legion.
Man, I will definitely get into Arcane Legions. But you ask how it works as a business, and of course the first funny response is, oh, it doesn't. Game stores crop up and go under so quickly. It's a little bit of a terrifying market to be in because it's not recession-proof at all. It's people's disposable income. It's the stuff they do when they have a little money left over. And it's the first thing where the spouse or the mother or whoever says, "There's no money for that. We got to drop that." And our strategy for that has basically just been making this a place where people really want to come and hang out and continue to be a part of. And you have to run it like a business, and I feel like a lot of game stores are run as a hobby. I really like games, I'm going to open a game store, which is a great place to start, but then you have to get serious about business plan and profit and loss and balance sheets and stuff like that.
The way it's always been explained to me is that Mark was like, let's open a store, it'll be great, people can come, hang out, this will be awesome. And then Jennifer's like, all right, I'll start working on, a business plan.
My answer to most things is, but that's going to cost $100,000. Where is that coming from? And how do you stay open? And how do you keep stock on the shelves and things like that? And it's just a constant, everyday pounding of, is this product line profitable? Is it about to go out of print? Is the company about to cancel this game and we'll get stuck with all this stock? Or is Hasbro just going to release the same action figure in different packaging next week?
Yeah, I mean, that's happened with a few of the DC action figures that are re-releases from last year. The CCG market is just
it's so volatile.
You never know. I mean, you can go to Gen Con, and I think an excellent example of this was a game called Spoils. They debuted at Gen Con one year. They had, big prize tournaments and this, that, and the other thing. They were giving all sorts of stuff away. And then, I think it was maybe a year and a half later, it was gone, and it was kind of a surprise to some people, but I had made sure by advisement that we not get too deep into it, and it turns out it was a good call because it was just not meant to be, I guess. And it's tough sometimes to tell because a game will come out and it'll be really great. Dreamblade was another great example of how awesome a strategy game that was.
Sometimes you can see the writing on the wall, though.
Yeah, Jennifer doesn't like to talk about Dreamblade and how it went down.
They abandoned me, but. Business-wise, the best advice on running a game store that I ever got was from an owner of a really, really successful game store in Kansas City, where my parents live, where we went touring around and asking questions, when we thought about opening the store. And he said, you have to understand the product cycle. People are going to get into a game, they're going to play it hardcore for a few weeks or a few months, and then they're going to look for the next thing. And it's not about making them play that game forever and keep buying that game. It's about knowing when they're about to get bored and then rolling out the new thing and saying, look, I know you're bored with that. Give this a shot. And we've really found that that's the case. When we first opened, Warhammer 40K was going great. We couldn't get anybody to play fantasy. And everybody told me, fantasy's never going to work in Durham. The fantasy scene is all in South Raleigh. Oh, that's the only place they're ever going to play fantasy. And we believed it for a year or two. And then, somebody came in who was really serious about getting it started. A player was like, yeah, we wanted to get some fantasy started. And we started an escalation league, and we pitched it to the 40K players. And a lot of them were just beginning to get disillusioned with 40K, and they jumped ship and moved to fantasy. And so there's this constant back and forth. People are not going to stick with the same thing forever, and you can't expect them to want to play the same thing.
So
definitely.
Okay. So obviously there's that bit of trying to read the market and read your customers, and they come and tell you what they're interested in. But there's a whole bunch of decisions that have to go into who carries what you're going to carry. Whose tastes are on display when I look around the store?
That's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice over there in the store, we've got the Force FX lightsabers now, which those are really awesome. But that was all Mark right there, I think.
Yeah.
And they're really cool. It's just, you got to pitch them to the right people. I'm trying to save up for one myself. But
Mark will frequently come to B&B because he's the Glee kid, right? Everything with Mark, we call him the superlative man because everything is the coolest thing ever, and which is why we love him. But he'll always come to me and say, "Oh, this is so cool. We have to get this in," and then I have to go back and make the business decision of how much of it, what's an appropriate quantity for a test market, that kind of thing. And then there are some things where you have to say, "I'm going to commit to this in advance," like this game Arcane Legions that we keep mentioning that just came out. We went to a couple of conventions where they were talking about it, and we saw it online, and it seemed like it was a really interesting new game mechanic. But of course, nobody's ever heard of it, and it's coming out of Europe. And so if you're going to get people into it, you have to have it on the shelf. Nobody's going to come in looking for it. And we just decided, yeah, we're going to get committed. We're going to order a huge launch kit. And it's been very, very successful. But I talked to other owners who say, oh, well, nobody ever came in and asked for it, so I never bought it. And, that may be appropriate for their store, but you constantly have to be making that decision of, do I think I can get my players into this? How deep do I have to go in to make that decision? And so there's stuff I get really enthusiastic about, like Arcane Legions. Mark gets really enthusiastic about other things. So it's sort of a seesaw.
And then, I mean, there's things like the collectibles market with, like, action figures and toys and stuff like that. And sometimes it's like, yes, we have to get this in because it's Star Wars.
Right.
But I mean, things like Indiana Jones, I think, is a great example where, the new movie came out and then they launched action figures and everyone was like, let's get some action figures. Everyone's going to be big into this. And it's like, all the people that went to see the Indiana Jones movies, or the new one, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, or at least a lot of them, grew up with the old Indiana Jones movies. So they were buying those action figures. Mm-hmm. But some of them, aren't really collectors anymore. So they've grown up and grown out of that whole thing. I mean, I used to collect Star Wars figures, but I don't actually anymore, not because of the quality of anything, but just because, time, money, space. Most of mine are in storage.
Long story short, Indiana Jones figure is not a good idea.
But it's just, I mean, there's a little bit of everyone's taste in here. Someone will see something online and be like, hey, can we get that? And look into it and see if it's possible. Magic players.
And to a large extent, the customer's tastes are on display. Players will come in and say, we really like the sleeves produced by this certain company. Mm-hmm. Can you get them? And we say, well, yeah, of course. Why would we not? And to some extent, our web customers even are reflected here because there are things that are on the shelves in the store that don't sell that well in the store, but because we keep them in quantity anyway for website sales, it allows us to stock a wider array of product than we would otherwise.
Cool. Well, Jennifer, you obviously have a passion about this. As a woman in the kind of a male-dominated sci-fi world, are people sometimes surprised to find out that you're pretty much running the show in a business way, and obviously you're passionate about it? Do they come in and go, all right, where's the guy in charge and all that?
And sometimes that does happen. We're in a really progressive area here, so it's actually fascinating that right now there are sort of 3 game stores in my stomping grounds, and one of them's down in Cary, and it's run by 2 gals, and one of them's in Greensboro and Burlington, and it's run by a woman. And so that is actually kind of the status quo here, believe it or not.
Cool.
But whenever I've gone to gaming groups, like I'll show up to play 40K or something, people are like, oh, just refer to her as her. She's the only chick in the room, which I find delightful and funny. And when we have our role-playing groups with my husband have generally, for whatever reason, been more girls than guys. And people are always saying, how did you manage to find a female-dominated role-playing group? It's a little strange, but most of our staff is women. And, I think that this is a really great time for games because I think that games, especially board games, are becoming more appealing to women. Mm-hmm. And I think that they're really a bigger market force than they used to be.
It's okay to be geeky.
That's right.
It is.
Yeah, awesome. the theme of today is what a great time to be into this stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, thanks very, very much, Jennifer and Zachary, for taking the time to talk with me today. And I hope the readers of Bull SPEC come by very soon, if they haven't for some strange reason, if they're in the Durham area, or they get a chance to visit the website or the Facebook group or follow you on Twitter if they're not. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for talking with us.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome.